So this is the last question from the quadratics worksheet. This is question 13, and we're going to go through this step by step. So we've got a diagram. It's not drawn to scale, so you can't do measurements, but we've got this diagram, and we're told that the area is 119 centimetres squared. So I'm going to put that just in my diagram to remind me. The area is 119 centimetres squared. Okay, and it's a trapezium, so we do need to know the area of a trapezium formula, and you should know that already. If you don't, you can look it up in your notes. And this question, it's quite a big multi-step question. The overall question is actually worth 6 marks, which is quite a lot for GCSE. Okay, so let's have a look at this. We're told about the area of the trapezium, and it's important that we understand what this question is asking. It's asking us in part A to show that we get this quadratic equation, and then in part B that we'll do separately, we're asked to solve this quadratic equation. So one good thing is if you couldn't quite get this equation out, if you couldn't do this part A, you can still get all the marks for part B by solving this quadratic. But part A is a show that question. So we can't start with this. We've got to start with the information in the question and hopefully get to this stage as our answer to part A. Okay, so area of trapezium. And you should remember, I hope, if you don't, you need to learn this. The area is a half of A plus B, where A and B are the parallel sides, times the perpendicular distance between them. Okay, and we either write it like this, or we can write it as A plus B over 2, so the same thing, we're halving that, and then we're multiplying that by the perpendicular height. Okay, so my A and B are my parallel sides, so my A is x plus 6, my B is 3x minus 4, all the other way around, doesn't matter because we're adding them. So there's my A and my B values, and my H value here, my perpendicular height, is this value x minus 1. And I know that my area here is 119, so I can substitute that in for this area here, 119. Okay, so let's write this out. So my area is going to be a half of A plus B, or A plus B over 2, times H. So let's sub in what we know. We know the area actually is 119. A, I'm going to take as x plus 6, and B as 3x plus minus 4. But if we've written them round the other way, you know, this is A and this is B, it doesn't matter at all. And then I need to multiply that, so I'm going to use brackets to mean multiply by this x minus 1, my perpendicular height. So let's sort out these brackets. So 119, a half, and in here I've got x plus 3x, which is 4x, plus 6 minus 4, so plus 2. And then I've got x minus 1 in my other bracket. Now here, what this is going to end up with is a quadratic, because 4x times x is 4x squared. So I'm definitely going to get a quadratic here, but I need to sort this out. I need to be having a look at simplifying this on this side, so expanding these brackets so that I end up with a quadratic equals to 0, and then we can do our product sum and we can solve this quadratic. So this is going to be a little bit of FOIL rule. We're going to expand these brackets here so that I get a quadratic that I can solve. So I'm going to expand my brackets there. If you remember using FOIL rule to do that. And then I'm going to rearrange it so that I end up with a quadratic ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. That's what I want to end up with, and then I can solve this. So let's expand these brackets first of all. So using FOIL. So first times first, 4x times x is 4x squared. 4x times minus 1 is minus 4x. Positive 2 times x is positive 2x. Positive 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. And I'm just going to keep going with this, simplifying as I'm going through, collecting like terms. 4x squared, I can collect my x terms in the middle, so that's minus 2x overall, and then my negative 2 at the end. And here, this has worked out quite nicely, hasn't it? Because I can multiply by a half here and simplify these things down, or if you had it written as divide by 2, I can actually divide each of these by 2 and simplify this down a little bit. So 119 is equal to half of all of this, so 4x squared minus 1x minus 1. And now if we look, I'm almost at where I want to be. The only last step I need to make is to get 0 on one side of this quadratic. So let's subtract the 119 from both sides. And that's going to leave me with 0 on this side and then 2x squared minus x minus 1 minus another 119 is minus 120. And we've got the equation that they want. So I've done that first part of this question. But that's what that first part's about. And some of you, when I've looked at your work, have just gone straight into trying to solve this without showing that it's true. So gone sort of straight for part B. Okay, so that's part A. Let's have a look at part B. Part B is asking us to actually solve this equation. So let me just get a piece of paper now. So in part B, we're asked now to solve that equation because we're asked to find the value of x. So to find the value of x, we need to solve this. So I'm going to solve that equation, 2x squared minus x minus 120 equals 0. And don't forget that minus x, we can always, if we want to, put a 1 in front of that. That's minus 1x. Okay, so let's have a look at our product and sum here. So our product is these two numbers times together. So our product, I want two numbers that multiply to give me minus 240. The 2 times the minus 120. And then I want my sum. So when I add the two numbers together, I want that to be negative 1. Now, it's not particularly obvious, I don't think, what's happening here, but I want to get two numbers that are quite close together, look, because I need to have the sum of them being minus 1. And one of them's going to have to be negative and one of them's going to be positive again here because we've got a negative product, so I need a minus times a plus gives a minus. And I want the difference between those two numbers then, you know, the plus and the minus. I want, when I add them together, I want it to give me an answer of minus 1. Now, when you're doing this, again, you know, you might not see it straight away. In the last one that we did on this question 11, I went through really systematically, you know, starting at 1 with factors, factor pairs, 1 and 240, 2 and 120. But here, I know that I want this to be 1, so I know the numbers I need to be quite sort of close together. We could start off, you know, with something that we know though. So let's say, you know, 10 and 24 definitely go into this. But again, there's no way, no combination of this with pluses and minuses is going to give me minus 1. This is even, so I know it's going to be an even number is one of my factors. So let's go for 12. So 12 into 240 goes 20. But again, no combination of this is going to give me minus 1. I might think of 14. 14 doesn't actually go into this, but if you didn't know that, you could always check that. You know, let's do a bit of bus stop method. 14 into 240. So 14 into 2 doesn't go. 14 into 24 goes once with 10 left over. But then 14 definitely doesn't go into 100 an exact number of times. So I don't want a decimal going on here. So that's no use to me. But let's try the next even number up. Let's try 16. 16 into 2 doesn't go. 16 into 24 goes once with 8 left over. And then 16 into 80, well, 8 is half of 16, so that definitely works. 16 into 80 goes 5 times. So there's my factor pair there. I've got 16 and 15, and I can definitely get a combination of those with a negative and a positive that gives me minus 1 overall. So that's going to be minus 16 and plus 15 to give me a sum when I add these two things together of minus 1. Okay, let's get back to this question then. So let's split that middle term up. So that's going to give me 2x squared minus 16x plus 15x minus 120 is 0. So now let's do our factors by grouping. So from this first expression, I can take 2x out. I can see there is a common factor, and that's going to give me x minus 8. And then I know for this next part that my bracket's going to be x minus 8, because that's how factorising works, doesn't it, with quadratics? I know that this needs to be the same thing. So let's look at this. I need a plus in the middle. What do I need here? I need 15 to get 15x. So 15 times x is positive 15x. 15 times minus 8 is negative 120. So that definitely works. So x minus 8, 2x plus 15. And there's my factorisation. And I said this if you've watched the last video, that is factorised. And some of you stopped at this point with all the questions actually. That is factorised, but it's not solved yet. Okay, so solved means find the values of x. So I've got to keep going with this. Well, 2 brackets multiplied to give me 0. So this bracket must be 0. Or this bracket must be 0. and then just solving these linear equations, adding 8 to both sides here, is going to give me x equals positive 8. Take the 15 away from both sides here, and then divide by the x. So minus 15 over 2, I can leave it like that. Well, that's minus 7.5. So if I was just solving this quadratic without any other part of the question, they would be my two answers, my two values of x. X is 8 or x is minus 7.5. But in this particular question, it's, you know, a real life situation. It's actually a shape here. We've got measurements. So if I'm looking at these answers, x being minus 7.5 minus 7.5 doesn't make any sense here, because let's just say for this one, minus 7.5 minus 1 is minus 8.5. So that means that this length will be negative, or we definitely can't have a negative length. So this, in this particular question, this is what we call a contradiction. Okay, we can't have negative lengths. So that means that's not a relevant answer. It is the answer to this, it is one of the answers to this quadratic, but it's not relevant for this particular question, in the context of this question. So what's our answer here? Our solution here is x equals 8. And that was the answer to part B. And if the question asked you to find the different lengths, then we'd just substitute x equals 8 in here. But that's the final bit of this final question on that quadratics. So I hope that's explained that. And what I would like you to do is to make sure you've got questions 11, 12 and 13 corrected in your notes. And if you haven't had a go at them yet, because you were stuck on those ones, then make sure you pause the video and you go through and you get this into your notes.